Good afternoon. Welcome, Rotarians and guests, to Fellowship Hall. I am Rochester Rotary President Tracy Armstrong. I would like to keep you standing to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. I want to thank you all for being with us today, Rochester Rotary and the Rochester Business Alliance. We got a rowdy table up here. We are excited to co-host this lunch and to welcome Governor Andrew Cuomo to our city today. In addition to our governor, I would like to welcome some other guests with us. Mayor Lovely Warren, City Council President Loretta Scott, Jim Brown, the Executive Director of the Joseph A. Floriano Rochester Riverside Convention Center, and Bob Duffy, President and CEO of the Rochester Business Alliance. The Rochester Rotary Club is a service organization with more than 100 years of commitment to this Rochester community. Working together, there are more than 350 men and women professionals that live out the Rotary International motto, service above self. Our club is involved in two major initiatives locally. We have more than a 20-year partnership with the Roberto Clemente School Number 8 here in the city. Dozens of Rotarians go into that school day in and day out to volunteer, working with the teachers and the students there. We also have a college scholarship program for School 8 as well. We also run and operate the Sunshine Campus in Rush, New York. The Sunshine Camp is a 157-acre facility that provides a unique camping experience for more than 2,500 children with disabilities in our community every summer. We will soon dedicate and celebrate the most exciting addition to this camp in more than its 90-year history, a fully accessible wooden treehouse, the only treehouse of its kind in the Finger Lakes region. It will feature an array of sensory equipment, ramps, and wide platforms. The treehouse will be up and running this summer. And also, just an FYI, we dedicate a book to the Roberto Clemente School in the honor of the speaker, and the governor was nice enough and happy to sign that book a moment ago, as well as we gave him a treehouse ornament in celebration of his time with us today that was given to us through the childhood, Holy Childhood. So I want to thank him very much for that. Now it is my very distinct pleasure to welcome Danny Wegman to the podium to introduce our special guest. Danny is the CEO of Wegmans Food Markets and co-chair of the Finger Lakes Regional Economic Development Council. Danny.
Thank you, Tracy, and good afternoon. I have a few folks I'd like to recognize, please, and the first is the Empire State Development President and CEO designee, Howard Zemsky. Howard? Finger Lakes Regional Economic Development Council co-chair, Joel Seligman. Joel? And Central New York Regional Economic Development Council co-chair, Rob Simpson. Welcome, Rob. It's my honor to welcome today a special guest, our state's governor, Andrew Cuomo. Before I welcome the governor to speak today, I'd like to say a few words regarding the topic of today's address, growing the upstate economy. 4 years ago, the governor started the Regional Economic Development Councils. The councils included business people, public officials, and educators. They considered the strengths of the region and what they could do to grow together. There were very clear goals. The goals were economic development and jobs. The way you got the money, you had to compete to win. The way you were going to win is you had to have consensus in your region. The first year, we lost. Not much fun. Forward to this January, the governor was here in Rochester to unveil the Upstate Revitalization Competition, a $1.5 billion program modeled on the success of what is happening in Buffalo, combined with the regional focus and competitive nature that made the Regional Economic Councils so successful. We all read about Buffalo's success in the news, but seeing is believing. So a few weeks ago, we visited Buffalo to see firsthand how the Buffalo Billion had benefited the city. And the effects were obvious. Skyscrapers in the air, new development, and buildings going up everywhere you turned, and a new optimism and hope among the people and among the business community. Most significant of all, 15 people spoke. They were all in agreement. They had truly achieved consensus. They are achieving success because they gained consensus. I was an economics major in college. We studied Adam Smith, who taught that individuals pursuing their own self-interest would produce the best economic growth. Today, Governor Cuomo has shown me a better way. I call it Cuomonomics. His approach is a regional approach that includes the entire community. Competition is a key driver of this approach. Without competition, we would not have consensus. This is not a small change, it is a game changer. I hope you understand its significance. Competition is essential for progress to occur. It challenges all of us to raise our game. Governor Cuomo is the first governor to really think about Upstate and give us an opportunity. Let's ensure that we vote for this opportunity in this year's state budget. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Governor Andrew Cuomo. Governor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you. It's truly my pleasure to be in Rochester. Well, before it's my pleasure to be in Rochester, it's my pleasure to be out of Albany and the budget negotiation, which is some kind of cruel water torture that goes on for a prolonged period of time. Former Lieutenant Governor Bob Duffy knows it very well. It's the heat of the budget negotiation now, and we're doing it with the Assembly and the Senate, and you sit there and literally almost with every legislator go through the issues that are important, which can get old after a while. And it's always a pleasure to come to Rochester. You know, for those of you who are here all the time, I don't know that you appreciate it, but when you enter the city, you just are overwhelmed with the feeling of the intellectual capital that really built this city, you know. You see it in the architecture in the homes, you see it in the university system, you see it in the museum and the appreciation of the arts. It really is a special community that was driven from that intellectual capital. And it's a special part of the state, and I hope you don't take that for granted, because you're all very lucky to be here. You have a great mayor, lovely Warren, who we're doing all sorts of great work with, and it's a pleasure to be with her. Let's give her a round of applause. To Danny Wegman, who runs a really phenomenal business in the truest sense of the word. Wegmans is the model of corporate citizenship, right? And it says that you can be a good company and you can be a good citizen. And Wegmans really is the poster child for that, and he has a lot to be proud of, and we're proud to have him here, and we're proud to thank him for the good work that he does on the Regional Economic Development Council as well as everything else. Danny Wegman. To Joel Seligman, who's the co-chair on the REDC. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your good work, Joel. Let's give him a round of applause. Tracy Armstrong, thank you for the invitation and thank you for the kindness. Tracy gave me a picture of my father when he was here for the building opening, believe it or not, and that was very, very special, and I thank Tracy for that. And you met Howard Zemsky. You're going to be seeing a lot of Howard Zemsky. Howard Zemsky is going to become the chairman of the Empire State Development Company, which is very important. It oversees the Regional Economic Development Councils. He's a businessman from Buffalo who is credited with the Buffalo Billion, what's been called the Buffalo Billion Revitalization. So he's a great businessman, fancies himself an economic genius, and believes he has a great wit, a very dry sense of humor, which he thinks is appealing and attractive. And he's constantly trying to perfect it, you see. So it can get a tad annoying after a while, but he's going to be working statewide. So there are a lot of cities that will have to absorb his ongoing effort at developing a sense of humor. But he is a good businessman, and he has had good success. So let's give him a round of applause, Howard. And last but certainly not least, a man who I miss very much, a man who I am so proud to call a friend in the truest meaning of the word. He was a legendary mayor of Rochester. I worked with him when I was Attorney General. And he couldn't have been a better partner as Lieutenant Governor. We wouldn't have had half the success we did in our first term if it wasn't for Bob Duffy and his talent and his ability, which he proved every day. And you're lucky to have him back in Rochester, Bob Duffy. And we're going to talk about the Upstate Agenda, and I want to start with Bob Duffy, because he was mayor of Rochester, I was Attorney General, I was going to run for governor, and I came to Bob and I asked him if he would be Lieutenant Governor. And Bob said, you know, I want to stay, frankly, in Rochester. I love Rochester. This is my home, and this is what it's about for me, and I want to help Rochester. And I said to him, Bob, you know, the best way for you to help Rochester is to go to Albany, because you can't save Rochester from Rochester, and Buffalo can't save Buffalo from Buffalo. We need to get the state government to stop doing what they're doing wrong and start doing what they're doing right. So if you really love Rochester, you'll come to Albany, as funny as that sounds. And we talked about it, and he thought about it, and we went back and forth, and ultimately he said yes on that basis. And we had been talking over the years about how frustrating it was for a mayor of Rochester who wasn't being heard in Albany, who wasn't getting the help he needed from Albany, who had been abandoned by Albany and the New York State Legislature. And I said, well, let's go and we'll fix it. And we'll put Albany on notice that there's a place called Upstate New York that needs a lot of help and can make a significant contribution. And that is exactly what we did. But that fight, that struggle for recognition and assistance and help, that goes on today. We've made great progress, but it is a constant challenge. And now, as we're in the budget process, which is once again the time when the state is deciding where it spends attention, where it spends resources. As we speak, literally, the time for Rochester and Buffalo and Syracuse to make their voice heard is right now, because the budget process is that important. Now, we're coming down to the most critical period in the budget process. the executive presents his budget in January, which is my vision of what the budget should be. Today, the Assembly and the Senate put out their budgets. So you now have 3 budgets, 3 snapshots of what the 3 game plans are. And you see different plans and different priorities in each. My priorities are some pieces are in the Assembly budget, some pieces are in the Senate budget, and it now becomes a question of whether or not we can reconcile these 3 different visions and come up with one budget, right? For many years, the state was very poor at doing that. That's why we never had the budget done on time. And they would fight about their politics, but they wouldn't get the budget done. Bob and I prided ourselves on our reasonableness and on our collegiality. We had the good fortune to get 4 budgets done on time, the first time in 40 years in the first administration, something that we're very proud of, that the government actually worked. And I am cautiously optimistic that we get that done again. But what I said to the legislature this year is even more important than just getting a budget done. I want to make sure we get the right budget done with the right priorities. And this year, a top priority is having ethics reform done in Albany. Because at one point, enough is enough. And there have been a series of these scandals that go on. It seems every couple of weeks there's another story about another official in Albany who got caught in a scandal. We can't have the government that the people of this state deserve until they trust the government. And I think that it's essential that in this budget, the legislature recognizes the need for real ethics reform, and we get real ethics reform, real income disclosure. So if you represent a client on the outside as a part-time legislator, we know who that client is, we know who's paying you, and we know who you're working for, whether it's the private client or you're working for the people you represent in your district. I have a very aggressive program on transparency and disclosure to restore the people's trust, but I think that's a top priority in this budget, and that is something, frankly, that I am not willing to sacrifice. We have a lot of education reform proposals in this budget that change the way we do education services and emphasize performance. Why? Because government's way is just to throw money at a problem. That's what government does. It's not working well, throw more money at the problem. But sometimes money is not the answer. We spend more per pupil in this state than any state in the United States of America. Period. Period. And we are decidedly mediocre in terms of performance. Well, spend more money. No. We have been doing that for 20 years. And we're at the top level in the country. It's the system that is not performing because there's been too much of a bureaucracy. We have schools that have been failing in this state for 10 years. You know the school is failing. It has been failing for the past 10 years, and we continue operating that school the same way, year after year, year after year. We've sent 250,000 students to schools that we know are failing, and we paid those schools the highest amount of money in the United States. That's not what education is all about. It's about accountability. It's about performance. There's something called the teacher evaluation that 45 states have now done. It is the basic tool to evaluate performance by teacher, by school. And you find out what schools are doing well, what schools are not doing as well, and that's how you allocate your help and your assistance. We now have a teacher evaluation system that came back. 99% of the teachers are doing great. 99%. Only 38% of the students are graduating at class level, but 99% of the teachers are doing great. Can't be. 99% of no class does extraordinary. So I want reforms to the teacher evaluation system. When we know a school is failing, I want to move to new failing schools. I want to reduce the number of tests that our children are taking. We have stress and anxiety among our student population like we've never had before. Tests, 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 and then teachers who teach to the test for no purpose. That has to change. And we have to change the accountability of the entire system because it starts at the top. Who runs education in the state of New York? Who? Here we are, 150 people, the brightest of the bright. Nobody knows who runs education. How can that be? How can that be? Education. Every politician gets up. Education is the most important thing. Okay, who's in charge? You would think me. Not me. Don't blame me. I have nothing to do with it. I have as much to do with it as you do. And nobody knows. It's something called the Board of Regents. The Board of Regents. Are there any regents here? That's a good thing, because they would not be happy right now. The Board of Regents. The Board of Regents is an independent body which appoints a president and a commissioner, and that's who runs education. Governor has nothing to do with it. Senate will say they have nothing to do with it. The Assembly appoints the regents, New York State Assembly. But they don't take any responsibility because they appoint the regents, and then the regents then run education. That's the way government likes it. They like these amorphous institutions where you really don't know who's responsible because then you have nobody to blame. And that's so convenient. Yes, but you have nobody who's going to get the job done. That has to change, and that has to change this year. I want to increase the minimum wage in this state because the truth is the minimum wage is at $9. That's $18,000 a year. You cannot live in this state and raise a family on $18,000 a year. You can't pay the rent, you can't pay for food, you can't pay for insurance, and you can't buy clothes on $18,000 a year. The Assembly wants to raise it to $15 an hour. God bless them. Shoot for the stars. That's what they did in the Assembly. Senate is totally against raising the minimum wage. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I want to raise it from $9 to $10.50 statewide. And often the political truth is in the middle. We also have in this budget the greatest single investment in upstate New York, probably in history, but certainly in modern political history, over $10 billion to invest in upstate New York. And it's something that we're very proud of. And that's what I want to talk to you about today specifically. That investment in the budget and what it would do, and hopefully talk to you about how we need to get it passed. Now take a quick step back, thinking of seeing Bob Duffy today. Let's remember what happened with the upstate economy overall. Part of it had nothing to do with anyone. Nobody was to blame. Part of it was, I believe, a consequence of what government did or failed to do. The upstate economy basically suffered because the economy shifted away from us. Nobody's fault. We were the manufacturing economy. That's what made us. The Erie Canal, manpower, transportation, and that was upstate New York. All along the canal corridor became the thruway corridor. That was the engine. We were in a manufacturing economy. That economy changes. It goes overseas. Manpower is cheaper overseas. It takes a terrible toll on upstate New York. Yes, true. Kodak goes from 60,000 down to about 3,000, and that story is replicated all across upstate New York. Textile mills, IBM, Xerox. Every town has its own story. All right, that was the situation. Happened to a lot of Midwest states, happened to Western Massachusetts, happened to a lot of Northeast states. Our challenge was then to retrofit that economy. Unfortunately, we then had a compounding problem. What? Highest tax state in the United States of America, state of New York. And people and businesses that became much more mobile. And the confluence of those 2 points was problematic. Why would you stay in the highest tax state in the United States? Move. Pick up your laptop and go. Why not? Why would you stay in the most expensive state? And then why would you stay upstate in the most expensive state? I can see certain attraction in downstate New York. I think it was harder in upstate New York when that economic shift was being done and the taxes were going through the roof. Third, government failed to respond to the population shifts. Buffalo goes from about 500,000 to 250,000 people. Literally half the size. When you have a city that shrinks by half, you have to do something differently. Rochester goes from 300,000 people to 200,000 people, roughly. When the economics change, then the government must change. Government is not immune from the economics. When you have those fewer people, you had to change the way you were doing business. But we never did. The localities wound up taxing fewer people more. Because the population shrunk, they took the same expenses attributed to those people. Taxes went up. The more taxes went up, the more people left. And we started our own downward spiral. State government was nowhere. They were just asleep at the switch. They were totally absent from this transition in the economy. To the extent the state did anything, they actually facilitated the decline. They would give annual small cash subsidies to try to make up the shortfall, which caused the state to have to raise its taxes, which then continued the downward spiral. And over the years, the state wound up subsidizing more and more of the upstate cities to a greater and greater extent, to where it is now at an absurd and unsustainable level. State of New York right now pays about 15% to Rochester's budget, 60% of Rochester's schools. Albany, 20% of the budget, 34% of the school cost. Utica, 20% of the budget, 60% of the school cost. Buffalo, 35% of the budget, 70% of the school cost. Syracuse, 25% of the budget, 70% of the school cost. Over the years, the state basically just winds up underwriting the upstate cities. And it is just not a sustainable equation going forward. Now, this goes on for decades. Enter Bob Duffy and Andrew Cuomo 4 years ago. State is facing a $10 billion deficit, one of the highest deficits in history. Upstate New York economy was one of the slowest in the United States of America. So the facts. And not only a slow economy, a sense of hopelessness in upstate New York. Just a sense of there's nothing we can do about this. A sense that it's not going to get better. Too many young people leaving because they think they have to leave because that's where their future is and that's where the jobs are. No sense of possibility. No sense of hope and expectation that this place was going to change. What did we do? We followed a very specific plan that is the inverse of the problems. We reduced taxes in the state of New York. Every year we were there and we reduced them dramatically. Middle class tax rate, personal income tax rate for the middle class in this state, up to $300,000, lowest level in 60 years. That's the income tax rate today. Corporate tax rate, lowest level in 47 years. Manufacturing tax rate, lowest level in 98 years. In this budget, we propose reducing taxes on small businesses to the lowest level in 100 years. So these were not little reductions. We then started the Startup New York program, which is zero taxes for new businesses in geographic zones, 64 zones statewide, 59 of the 64 in upstate New York. Why? Because that's where we needed the economic boost. We then worked with industries that were particular to upstate New York and could make a difference. We invested very heavily in the tourism industry. I love New York. We invested $48 million and made a tremendous increase in tourism spending, $2.8 billion in increased spending through the I Love New York tourism campaign of $48 million. We invested in the yogurt industry, Bob and I. They all laughed at us. We did a yogurt summit in Albany. It did sound funny when you think about it, a yogurt summit. Why did we do a yogurt summit? Because we love yogurt. I don't know. I wasn't even eating yogurt at the time. because we have a dairy industry in New York that is very important. And the dairy industry depends on the supply and demand for milk. And as the supply and demand of milk was fluctuating, the cost was fluctuating, making it very hard to operate the dairy industry. So we bring in the yogurt industry, not just yogurt, Greek yogurt, because Greek yogurt uses much more milk to make than normal milk, which is what Bob figured out. That's why you need a good lieutenant governor, because I would have never known about that whole Greek yogurt. We now make more Greek yogurt in New York State than any place outside of Greece. And we now have to import milk because our poor cows cannot produce enough milk for our yogurt industry. We developed the wine and beer industry. That has been particularly important for the Finger Lakes, and wine trails and the tourism that now goes with the wine and beer industry. And as you heard from Danny Wegman, we started a new model of economic development that totally changed everything the state had been doing. And they're called the Regional Economic Development Councils. And they are fundamentally different. First, it says, we don't have one economy in the state of New York. We have 10 different regional economies. And if you really want to help the economy, you have to help build that regional economy. Because the Finger Lakes region is one economy, and Manhattan is a different economy, and the North Country is a different economy, and the Hudson Valley is a different economy. And there is no one solution for all of them. You have to develop region by region, which said, stop having Albany make the decisions on how to spend economic development money. Ask the locality how they would spend the economic development money. Our model said, take the politicians out of the process. Did not make the politicians happy. But put the businessmen and the local leadership in charge of the process. And let the head of the local academic organization work with the big business council in the local region and let them develop a plan. And it said the plan has to be about creating jobs. Stop these one-time subsidies to governments that were failing by definition. And stop trying to prop up an entity that you can't prop up. And focus on transforming an economy so that region had an economy that can support it. I'd rather invest more in the city of Rochester and have Rochester develop an economy so Rochester can pay Rochester's own bills than give Rochester continuing short subsidies every year. It is a night and day difference. And then we said, as Danny said, we'll make it a competition among the regions. Why? Because we want the best plan. It's a big investment. And one of the ways to get the best is to make it a competition. And we'd have an annual competition, and Bob ran all these regions, transformed the upstate. People got excited. Some years they won, some years they lost, but we're all competitive types. You lose, you go back, you lick your wounds, you make some phone calls, you yell at people, and then you figure out what you learned and you move on. And that process is working extraordinarily well. Danny and Joel have done a fantastic job here in Rochester. You can see the product everywhere. Bob spent countless hours all throughout the state making it work. And what we're saying now is, we know this model works. We know it in Rochester. We know it from the experience in Buffalo, where we did it with a project called the Buffalo Billion, we called it. Why did we call it the Buffalo Billion? Because Buffalo was so depressed for so long and so cynical for so long. When we would go out there and try to talk to them about possibilities for Buffalo, they were not hearing it. They were not believing it. Why? Because it had been 40 years of decline. Do you know how many people came to them in those 40 years and said, I have a new idea, I have a new plan, I'm a new mayor, I'm a new governor, I'm a new county executive, listen to me, I'm going to help you. You hear that once, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times. At one point they give up. So Bob and I went out. We have a new idea. We have a new plan. It's going to work. And they looked at us and said, I heard this. We said, oh, really? You heard it? You're cynical? Your mind is closed? Your heart is closed? There's nothing I can say to you? We're going to give you $1 billion and invest $1 billion in Buffalo. That made this eyebrow raise. $1 billion. But that's what we needed was a crack. Just a crack. Just be a little open to us. Just give me a little crack to show you and to prove and open your mind a little bit. And we worked and we worked and we worked and we brought this model. Buffalo in 4 years has gone through a transformation that I would not have believed myself if you explained it to me 4 years ago. Not just on the numbers, creating jobs, young people moving back to Buffalo. Population of young people increases 4%, first time in 40 years. The young people population has increased in Buffalo. Jobs up, earnings up, housing values up, real estate market up. You walk down the street, smiles up. People believing. People believing. The model works. Why did we go to Buffalo? Well, you love wings. No, Buffalo was the toughest test case in the state. Buffalo was the slowest economy in the state. And we went and we did it in Buffalo because we wanted to rearrange Frank Sinatra's songs a little bit. If you can bring back the economy in Buffalo, you can bring it back anywhere. And we did want to go to the toughest case scenario for us, and we did. So you feel it in Rochester, you feel it in Buffalo, it's working. Now is the time to bring it to scale. And that's what our Upstate Agenda is all about in this budget, bringing that approach to scale. And that's what our $10 billion plan is. We want to spend $600 million for the Regional Economic Development Councils to do a second round of them. We want to spend $500 million to bring broadband to every corner of this state. Why? Because broadband is the infrastructure of tomorrow. The way Eisenhower said at one time, let's build the highway system, and then the private sector will come if we build the transportation system. The transportation system of the future is the broadband system. If we fully wire this state, we will be the first state in the United States where every area of this state is as competitive as any other area. Because if you do not have broadband, 3, 4, 5 years, you're not going to get a business to move there. You're not going to get families to live there if they can't do their business from their home. So it's an investment, and we'd be the first state in the country to do it. We want to invest in the thruway and keep the tolls from going up on the thruway for another year. Why? Because that thruway is the main artery across all of upstate. You raise those tolls on trucks, on traffic, et cetera. You raise the cost of doing business on everyone. Let the state keep those tolls flat for another year. That helps every business in upstate New York. We want to invest $50 million in the State Fair in Syracuse. Why? State Fair is still doing great. Phenomenal magnet. But it hasn't really been reinvented for decades, and we can do a lot better. We have hospitals that are in trouble, especially in upstate New York. We want to invest $700 million in saving failing hospitals. We want to take this opportunity, because the state does have a surplus, to invest in roads and bridges upstate and local infrastructure upstate, which has been suffering for years. And we want to invest $1.5 billion, which would be the largest single investment in something called the Urban Revitalization Initiative, which is what? Which is another level of competition for the Regional Economic Development Councils. Right now, they compete for a pot of about $700 million. We want to increase that pot with an additional $1.5 billion. So you would have winners who could go up to $130 million for a winner. The quote-unquote loser, the bottom region, would get $90 million. It would be between $130 and $90 million per year. Right now, the winner of the Regional Economic Development Councils get less than $90 million. So this would bring everybody up. And whether you're a winner or a loser, you would still be getting more money than you're getting today. Why? Those regional economic development councils are in their 5th year. They have more sophistication. They have more talent. They can actually use the money, and they can make a difference. If we get this Upstate Agenda, as I said before, it's the largest investment in the upstate economy probably in history. But Upstate is ready for it. And now is the time to do it. This has been a long time coming, but seize the moment, carpe diem. And this is the time to seize the moment. These regional councils have been up and running. They're working well. Dan Wegman, Joel Seligman, this is going to be their 5th year. They're getting better and better every year. We know the model works. We saw it in Buffalo. We see it in Rochester. So we know that we have the right template and the right model. With the economy overall is coming back, this is the time to step up and to do it. I am fully committed to fighting for this budget, but I need your help because this is still a democracy and it still responds to the loudest voices. And I know that you're frustrated in the past. We used to talk about how frustrating it was for a city like Rochester, where your delegation in Albany is too small to really win. And that's frustrating. And that frustrated you over the years. And Syracuse's delegation is too small to win. And Buffalo's delegation is too small to win. So yes, Buffalo or Rochester don't win, or Syracuse don't win. But Buffalo and Rochester and Syracuse and Utica and Albany, that does win. And this is not a Rochester plan or a Buffalo plan. This is a plan for all of upstate New York. And this is a plan that will help all of upstate New York. And if you come together and you make your voice heard and we get this plan passed, it will change fundamentally the economy and the trajectory of upstate New York. And now is the time to do it. And you can do it. And that's what we have been seeing day in and day out, and that's so much of what this program is about. Showing individual cities their own potential and their own capacity. Buffalo, that didn't believe it was coming back, now believes that it's coming back. And that is the first step. You put your voice together, you let your voice be heard to support this agenda, and we will get it. Why is it? What's the opposition? It's $10 billion. It's a lot of money. And in Albany, there are a lot of interests that follow the money. So it's just a large investment in upstate New York. You have other regions of the state that are fighting for their regions, and that's the competition. You have the local politicians that would rather spend the money on pork barrel rather than have the businessmen deciding where the money should go. You have the Albany establishment, which would rather keep the money in Albany and make the decisions in Albany rather than having the localities make the decisions. I get the opposition, but the facts are on our side, and the need is on our side. And the truth is, upstate New York has been shortchanged for too many years by that government in Albany. And this is a matter of basic fairness. And the truth is also, if upstate comes together to fight for this initiative, you will win, because you should win. And your case is right, and your case is pure. You have been disadvantaged. With this investment, you can turn around the economy, and you turn around the economy, it's in everyone's best interest. Because at the end of the day, this is not upstate or downstate. It is upstate and downstate. We are one budget. We are one balance sheet. Upstate success is downstate success. Upstate's loss is downstate's loss. My father used to say, we're the family of New York, and we share each other's benefits and we share each other's burdens. We share each other's sacrifices and struggles, and we share each other's successes. It is time we made the most of our assets in upstate New York. The time is now. I am a fully committed partner in that enterprise. Let's not lose the moment. Make your voice heard. Let's get the investment. Let's bring upstate New York to a place it's never been before, but it deserves to be. Thank you, and God bless you.